In 1958, Philip Klutznick, president of the Council of Major Jewish Organizations, met Senator John F. Kennedy to scout his views on Israel. The senator voiced his concerns about the Arab refugee problem and the risks of war in the region. Klutznick said, "Look, Senator, if you plan to run for the presidency and that is what you are going to say, count me out and count a lot of other people out too." After he won the Democratic nomination for the presidential election, Kennedy met a group of Jewish leaders in New York who pledged $500,000 towards his campaign. President Kennedy was not one to forget his debt. In spring 1961, after he became president, Kennedy told David Ben-Gurion, the Israeli Prime Minister, "I know I was elected because of the votes of American Jews. Tell me, is there something I can do for the Jewish people?" I am Dr. Hassan Bukhari, and this is the 15th episode of our series, Palestine versus Israel. The USA had played a key role in thwarting Israeli aggression in 1956, albeit for its own strategic reasons. Indeed, soon after the war, US President Eisenhower granted generous loans to Israel. Israel's performance during the war had convinced him of Israel's utility as a useful piece on America's Middle Eastern chessboard. From 1958 to 1960, the USA started the delivery of major weapons to Israel directly for the first time. But Eisenhower's successor, Kennedy, inaugurated a new era in US-Israel relations. From then on, the tail would wag the dog. Unlike Eisenhower, who was the victorious commander of Second World War fame and didn't need Jewish lobby endorsement to get elected, Kennedy was the first among a long line of US presidents who owed their election to the highest office in large part to the goodwill of the Jewish lobby. The Jewish lobby became so relevant a factor in American politics that usually both American presidential candidates competed with each other to earn its support. And the primary demand of the lobby for providing such support was unquestioned and unlimited support for the Zionist state of Israel. After becoming president in January 1961, Kennedy pledged unflinching support to the Zionist state. Soon after becoming president, he told the Israeli Foreign Minister Golda Meir, "The United States has a special relationship with Israel, comparable only to that which it has with Britain. I think it is quite clear that in the case of invasion, the United States would come to the support of Israel." But Kennedy also kept up his links with Egypt a bit paradoxically. His reasoning was simple. Egypt and Arab nationalism were considered a bulwark against the spread of communism in the Middle East. Charles Smith writes about Kennedy's Middle East policy. In the Middle East, he pursued a two-pronged approach, seeking closer ties with Israel while establishing better relations with the Arab neutralist camp led by Nasser. Economic aid agreements with Egypt were increased, especially regarding grain shipments. But at the same time, greater economic assistance was also given to Israel. And in a major move, the Kennedy administration decided to enter the Middle East arms race by providing military aid to Israel. In this case, Hawk anti-aircraft missiles, which were deemed necessary to balance Soviet military shipments to Iraq and Egypt. The US policy underwent a further pro-Israel shift after Kennedy's assassination in November 1963. Kennedy's successor, Johnson, was a huge Zionist sympathizer. Lyndon Johnson himself told an Israeli diplomat after assuming office, "You have lost a very great friend, but you have found a better one." The Hawk anti-aircraft missiles were supplied to Israel on the understanding that Israel will permit on-site inspections of its nuclear reactor, but Johnson made no attempt to hold Israel to this promise. Not only did he turn a blind eye to the Israeli nuclear weapons program and the US support it got for it, but he also showered Israel with weapon sales and aid. 200 pounds of enriched uranium found their way to Israel from the USA in 1966. The US also supplied Israel with 200 Patton tanks, 48 Skyhawk bombers, and myriad other armaments. On the other hand, the US aid to Egypt steadily shriveled during the Johnson era and was completely halted in early 1967. This Israel-American nexus was a great booster to Israeli confidence and played a pivotal role in enabling Israel to launch the Six-Day War in 1967. Whereas Israel was readying itself militarily and diplomatically for another round with the Arabs, with the USA securely in its corner this time, the Arab world was rife with disorder and plagued with folly. Jamal Abdel Nasser was riding the high tide of Arab nationalism after Egypt's political victory in the 1956 war, but Arab unity still proved a mirage. In 1958, for a moment it appeared that Arab unity might not be far off when Egypt and Syria united to form a single country known as the United Arab Republic, and the Hashemite monarchy of Iraq was violently overthrown in a coup led by Abdul Karim Qasim. It was thought by some that Iraq might join the United Arab Republic, but this was not to be. Qasim soon became a violent opponent of Jamal Abdel Nasser, despite espousing the cause of Arab nationalism himself as well. Instead of collaborators, they became vicious competitors. Qasim also gave much space to communists in Iraq, a strategy disliked by Nasser, who wanted the Arabs to remain neutral in the Cold War. The Egyptian and Syrian union also proved short-lived. It collapsed in 1961 with another coup in Syria. Nasser took the dissolution of UAR as a challenge to his claim on Arab leadership. An opportunity to reassert himself came up soon when in September 1962 the Yemenian monarchy was overthrown in a coup led by military officers who idolized Nasser and had even named their organization the Free Officers in his emulation. The Yemeni monarch Muhammad al-Badr managed to flee from the jaws of the coup plotters, however, and rallied his supporters for a counter-coup. This led to the start of a vicious civil war in Yemen, with Saudi Arabia backing the monarchists. Nasser, in a bid to shore up his prestige and power in the Arab world, lunged into the conflagration to support the Yemeni military officers who styled themselves as progressives and republicans. The Yemen war proved to be Nasser's Vietnam. It raged on for years and gobbled up precious Egyptian manpower and material resources. In 1965, 70,000 Egyptian soldiers were serving in Yemen. According to Egyptian Field Marshal Al-Gamze, by December 1966, some two-thirds of Egypt's armed forces were in Yemen. Millions of dollars were squandered in this futile war, and the casualty count was alarmingly high. According to Egyptian official records, between October 1962 and June 1964, more than 15,000 Egyptian officers and men were killed. By the end of the Egyptian military involvement in Yemen in 1967, Egypt had lost an estimated 26,000 soldiers there. Nasser's foolish war in Yemen brought great benefits to Israel. It severely weakened Egypt and sapped its potential for fighting a war with Israel. It also increased the amount of disorder and disunity in the Arab world and made coordinated action against Israel by the Arabs nigh impossible. The Israelis also gained valuable intelligence about the Egyptian armed forces when they were brought in for assistance in anti-Egyptian operations by the British who controlled the port of Aden in South Yemen then. According to the book, the 1967 Arab-Israeli War, Origins and Consequences, the Israelis were in many ways the prime beneficiaries of the operations. They were able to contribute to a conflict that tied one-third of the Egyptian military to faraway Yemen, divided Arab ranks between Saudis, Jordanians and Egyptians, and secured privileged access to intelligence on Egyptian weapons and tactics, all of which would contribute directly to Israel's victory in June 1967. In the 1960s, another pressing dispute was the Jordan River and its tributaries. The Jordan River system was vital to the agriculture of Israel and Jordan. The Americans had made some efforts in the 1950s to create agreement among different parties regarding the Jordan River system, but they had come to naught. Now, Israel unilaterally altered the status quo through its diversion projects, which aimed to pump water from Lake Tiberias to the Negev. The completion of this project in 1963 resulted in the bulk of water from the Jordan River system passing to Israel. Charles Smith mentions in his book Palestine and the Arab-Israeli Conflict, taking water from Lake Tiberias for use throughout the country and especially to irrigate the Negev desert in the south would significantly reduce the Jordan River water available to Jordans south of the lake. Construction of the water carrier took place in an atmosphere of frequent confrontations with Syria over border disputes and Israeli forays into demilitarized zones. United Nations observers believed that Israeli actions frequently violated UN agreements and were intended to provoke retaliation and justify Israeli accusations of Arab hostility. Thus, Israel robbed arid Jordan of precious amount of water while indulging in attempts to provoke Syria simultaneously. The Syrians wanted Nasser to join them in armed confrontation with Israel, but Nasser rightly believed that the Arabs were far from ready for a war. Consequently, Syrian dictator General Hafiz Amin accused Nasser of going soft on Israel and selling out Palestine for a few bushels of American wheat. Nasser shot back by accusing Syria of stabbing Egypt in the back and trying to drag the Arabs into war before they were unified. The water dispute was discussed at length during the Arab League summit held in Cairo in January 1964. Nasser successfully reasserted his stance of not plunging into a war with Israel and declared, "We cannot use force today because our circumstances will not allow us. Be patient with us. The battle of Palestine can continue, and the battle of Jordan is part of the battle of Palestine. For I would lead you to disaster if I were to proclaim that I would fight at a time when I was unable to do so. I would not lead my country to disaster and would not gamble with its destiny." As a response to Israel, the Arab League summit recommended diversion projects aimed at the sources of the Jordan River originating in Syrian territory. Charles Smith writes, "The January 1964 summit in Cairo approved the diversion of those tributaries of the Jordan River lying in Arab territories north of Lake Tiberias. That project, if implemented, would have endangered Israeli water resources by drastically reducing the amount available for diversion from the lake for their own national water scheme. Syrian work on the project led to Israeli attacks on Syrian construction sites in 1965 and 1966 and greatly increased tensions between the two countries. But for the moment, the Arab Summit decision of 1964 served to postpone consideration of a military response, for which most Arab states, including Egypt, were unprepared. So, the showdown was postponed. From this point onwards, the Syrians continuously indulged in aggressive moves at their borders. Apart from Israel, they also provoked Jordan and loudly declared King Hussein a traitor to the Arab cause due to his links with the USA. Israeli historian Michael Oren wasn't much wrong when he wrote, "Insecure at home and in fierce competition with Egypt and Jordan, Syria's rulers had tried to earn prestige by picking fights with Israel. It was clear that the so-called Arab nationalist rulers of Egypt, Syria and Iraq were more concerned with personal prestige and power than with the fate of the Arab nation. That is why these rulers oppressed their people at home while undercutting each other actively instead of coordinating against Israel. Another factor further complicated the situation. This was the Palestinian insurgent organization of Fatah, led by Yasser Arafat. Fatah was founded in Kuwait in 1957, and it posited that Palestine could only be liberated through consistent conventional and unconventional military effort against Israel by Arabs. In 1965, with Syrian support and encouragement, Fatah began a string of attacks against Israel. Fatah's logic was that these attacks would increase tension between Israel and its Arab neighbors. As a result, Israel would become more belligerent and all Arab countries would be forced to unite and fight Israel together. Fatah's leader believed that a united Arab front would surely vanquish Israel in a conventional war and result in the liberation of Palestine, when the reality was that Israel could easily smash all the Arab states in a conventional war. Both Jamal Abdel Nasser and King Hussein of Jordan were cognizant of this reality, but their cautious behavior created an opportunity for the Syrians to taunt the former as being soft on Israel and label the latter as a traitor. The Syrian behavior played right into Israeli hands, who wanted a war and knew they would win it. Ominously for the Arabs, Nasser, frustrated in Yemen, abandoned his prudent policy in mid-1966 and started moving towards the Syrian position as the Israeli-Syrian skirmishes continued. Israel also heavily bombed the Syrian water diversion project in July 1966, which had made little headway by then anyway. The strategy adopted by the Arab League in January 1966 had clearly failed. The Syrian-Egyptian concurrence of views resulted in a mutual defense pact, which was signed on the 4th of November 1966. In November 1966, another momentous event occurred as well. On the 13th of November 1966, Israel launched a vicious raid on the Jordanian border village of Samu in retaliation for the killing of 3 Israeli soldiers by a landmine. In broad daylight, Israeli infantry, an armored brigade, heavy artillery, mortars, engineers, and 2 Mirage squadrons blasted the village and demolished 118 houses, the police station, the local school, a medical clinic, and a mosque. Jordanian soldiers sent to the village were cut down, and a Jordanian aircraft was shot down as well. The attack left dozens of Jordanian soldiers killed and wounded. King Hussein was humiliated. Soon after the attack, riots and protests erupted all over the West Bank. Multitudes of Palestinians in the cities of Hebron, Jericho, Jerusalem, Ramallah, Nablus, Jenin, Tulkaram, and Kilkalia demonstrated against King Hussein and shouted pro-Nasser slogans. King Hussein responded by launching a propaganda offensive proclaiming that Nasser himself was hiding behind the United Nations emergency force at his borders and refused to protect fellow Arabs from Israeli attacks. Privately, though, Hussein started pondering over forming a firm alliance with Nasser, as his US allies refused to lift a finger to protect him from Israeli viciousness. According to some Israeli sources, Israeli PM Levi Eshkol ordered the massive raid on Samu purely to shore up his domestic standing. But it is amply clear that this raid was just the latest in a series of Israeli aggressive moves aimed to humiliate the Arab states and nudge them into starting a war which they would then lose. The Egyptians took the bait this time. Field Marshal Abdul Hakim Amir, Chief of Staff of the Egyptian Army, who was in Pakistan for an official visit at that time, proposed to Nasser that Egypt should order the United Nations emergency force removed from its borders. Amir believed that this would not only silence King Hussein's propaganda, but would also deter Israel from attacking Jordan, or Syria. Instead, Israel would be forced to face Egypt in battle. In Amir's view, the war would last 3 to 5 days, in which the Egyptians would stalemate Israel and then the UN would intervene and impose a ceasefire. Egypt's reputation as the defender of the Arab world would be shored up, and Israel would be left empty-handed, humiliated, and restricted from further aggression by the UN and the international community. Strangely enough, Nasser began seriously considering this wishful course of action divorced from ground realities. From January 1967 onwards, clashes between Syria and Israel increased in frequency. On 7 April 1967, 6 Syrian jets were downed in a one-sided dogfight. The Israeli planes mockingly burst Damascus after the dogfight. This humiliation caused Syria to exhibit even more belligerence. Many Arab leaders and public figures also joined the chorus and started issuing bombastic statements threatening Israel and prophesying a complete massacre of all Jews in Israel. War seemed on the horizon, a war that was cheered on by the Arabs, a war that they were bound to lose against a well-armed and well-trained adversary. Professor Shahid Alam was spot on when he wrote, President Jamal Abdel Nasser of Egypt too knew that he could not go to war and win. Yet, the Arabs lost no opportunity to threaten Israel and blundered headlong into a war that they should have done everything to avoid until they were better prepared. In the next episode of Palestine versus Israel, we will discuss the prelude to the Six-Day War of 1967 and the events that immediately preceded and led to it. Stay tuned, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel.